Okay, so here we go. Tzeh ulmad. Tzeh ulmad. It's a famous moment in the Haggadah. Tzeh ulmad. Go out and learn. Ma bikesh Lavan Arami lasot liYaakov Avinu. Go out and learn what Lavan the Aramean sought to do to Yaakov, to Jacob our father. And Lavan is so bad. Wait, now, again, it's going to be based in this verse, as it is stated, Deuteronomy, and Aramean was destroying my father and he went down to Egypt. Okay, it's going to be based on that verse, but it's like this presents Lavan is the Aramean, because Lavan is indeed an Aramean, and makes it so not only reads it as Lavan, but makes Lavan a worse, a more wicked character than Pharaoh himself. Pharaoh only decreed the death sentence on the males, but Lavan sought to uproot the whole people. Okay, that already, there's a lot, like, that doesn't quite make sense there. Like, the idea, we're gonna now get into the story that has, the story of Parshat Vayeitzei, that has Jacob in his uncle's house, in Lavan's house, and residing there for 2 decades. And then he leaves. And then eventually, much later, goes to Egypt. The two stories don't seem to be connected. And Lavan and Jacob, as we're going to see, have broigus the whole time. They're always like at odds. But the idea that Lavan tried to uproot the whole people, I mean, Lavan is part of the deal is Lavan is mating his daughters, and I use that word pointedly. There's something very patriarchal, more than usual in this Parsha, mating his daughters with Jacob. So he sought to uproot the whole people? Okay, so that's the famous appearance of Lavan, and that is only to say that Lavan is Lavan the wicked. Lavan is, according to the Haggadah, the cause of all of our misery. And yet, other than that, we don't talk a lot about Lavan. If I ask someone, oh, Lavan or Laban in the Bible, what do you think of him? A lot of people will be like, wait, who was that? It seems like a minor character. Okay, so we're going to try and figure out what the heck is Lavan doing in our Haggadah? What is Lavan doing so prominently in this Parsha? Jacob has conversation after conversation after conversation with Lavan. Jacob had maybe recorded one conversation with his own father, one conversation with his own mother, but 2. But Lavan, he's like, just like in constant interlock. Okay, so that's our topic for today. Let's say a blessing, just to bring some kedusha, some sanctity into this intellectual endeavor. Let's make it a spiritual endeavor as well. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Okay, here is the source sheet for you today. If you want to have it on your own, and I will share it. Now, we're going to do mostly, there's a lot of Lavan material. There's no way we could cover it all. Much of the Parsha is Lavan material. We're going to do mostly a close reading of one scene, the scene that I think is the weirdest and most interesting conversation that Lavan has with Jacob, the first conversation that Lavan has with Jacob. But before that, I want to just remind us that we met Lavan briefly back in Parshat Chayei Sarah. Briefly. And that is because Abraham's servant went out to find a wife for Isaac, and finds Rebecca, and she's got all of the gifts and more than that he expects. She seems to have been tapped or touched by God. And then Rebecca, the young maiden, ran and told all of this to her mother's household. Okay, and now Ulerivka ach, and Rebecca had a brother. It's almost like you should know something here. Now he's going to go away, but in our parsha he comes back with a roar. But Ulerivka ach, ushmo Lavan. Rivka had a brother, and his name was Lavan. Vayaratz Lavan, and Lavan ran out to the man at the spring. Ran out. And when he saw the nose ring and the bands on his sister's arms, when he heard his sister Rebecca say, "Thus the man spoke to me," he went up to the man who was still standing beside the camels at the spring. "Come in, O blessed of the eternal," he said. "Why do you remain outside?" Very nice language, by the way. Baruch Adonai, blessed of God. Come in, O blessed one of God. Why do you remain outside when I have made ready the house and a place for the camels? Okay, now, this is just the introduction, and it seems nice enough, but it's a good moment to give you a taste of how the commentators, famous commentators, see Lavan. Just look at Rashi here, who says, oh, he ran. Why did he run, and what did he run for? Because it came when he saw the ring. Meaning, oh, he ran. They're trying to read it because he saw the nose ring. There are riches there. And he said, this must be a rich man. And he had an eye to his money. Okay, that gives you a taste. That gives you a taste of how the rabbis are going to read Lavan. Oh, he's always scheming. He's greedy. He wants money, wants to, okay. And I'm not sure they're wrong. Like that little scene there where Lavan runs out and sees all the jewelry and says, oh, I have a place for all your camels. And that's kind of, but his presentation is lovely. And that's a big part of the Lavan question. His presentation is lovely. Baruch Adonai. And in fact, his name, Lavan, what does Lavan mean? It means white. He's the white one. Now, thank God we're not talking with the same racial coding in that time, because remember, the people writing this text are not white in the European way. But white in the biblical context often refers to purity, unblemished, like a white cloth without stain. Okay, and this I think is probably the best understanding of Lavan's name, is like Mr. White. He presents himself very crisp and clean. But quickly, we begin to wonder, what's this guy up to? What's this guy up to? Okay. All right, so that's the introduction. Now we are going to introduce Lavan to Jacob, and this scene, this interchange, is like loaded with. This is why Lavan seems to us to be such a character with an agenda, because there are little turns of phrase that he has. Everything seems so nice, and yet he seems to be referencing things, saying things, doing, and then eventually doing things which are totally not just maybe oppressive or greedy, but bizarre and tricking. And this is the last thing I'll say, and then we'll look at our main scene for today. You know, I call this class "Tricking the Trickster." Right. And we have to say right away that everything I've been saying, Lavan's so tricky, he's so sneaky, he's so devious, he's so, all of that that's a funny kind of figure to now put into battle with Jacob, whom we last saw lying to his father to steal his brother's blessing. So, like, that's Jacob's thing. Like, Jacob's the trickster in our tradition, but now he's going to be out-tricked, out-foxed. Okay, there's a bigger fox. Okay, let's. I keep hearing a little feedback, so just check if you're not muted. Okay, so let's take a look now. This is the scene that I really want to look at. There's a lot of Lavan material to look at, but this is the real. This is the juicy scene here. Okay, so. First of all, I mean, there's the scene at the well where Jacob is rolling stones off the well, and he meets Rebecca, and he falls immediately in love with Rebecca. He kisses Rebecca and then starts to cry. I mean, the whole thing is weird, but I've cut it off at that point because that's where we're at. But it's just that in itself is so bizarre and alluring that would command all of our attention. But I want to bring us to Lavan. So. Again, this is sort of like Rachel and Jacob. The scene is sort of like Rebecca running back into the house, and Lavan runs out. So look at this echo here, this very deliberate echo. Upon hearing the news of his sister's son, Jacob, ben Achoto, vayaratz likrato. He ran out to greet him. Look at Lavan run. Run, Lavan, run. Vaychabeklo, vaynasheklo. He hugged him and kissed him. Wow, that's nice. I mean, goodness. We've seen a little affection here and there, but hugging and kissing. I mean, this is the first hug I've seen in the Torah. Vayaveo el beito, and he brought him into his house. Vaysaper leLavan et kol hadvarim haele, and Jacob told him everything that had brought him here. And I wonder what the everything is. Okay. And then he says, Vayomer lo Lavan, ach, atzmi uvasari ata, vayeshiv imo chodesh yamim. Lavan said to him, you are truly my bone and flesh. And you stayed with him, and he stayed with him for a month. You are truly my bone and flesh. Now, that already is a kind of, now, first of all, we've got a lot of decoding already to do. When someone runs out to greet a guest, what are they doing? Who are they emulating, right? In our cultural consciousness? Abraham. Abraham runs out to greet the guest. Just like Lot, Abraham's nephew, then we hear like the same language, running out to greet the guest. And Lavan is like, always running out. Okay, now, I don't want to color this too much. Lavan is being nice and comes from the same place that Abraham, maybe he just, those are the customs in that place. But I want to take us back just even further because he says, you are my bone and my flesh, my bone and my flesh. Who says that before? Anyone know? Who says that before?
Does Adam say it about Eve?
Very nice, Ilana. Very nice. Adam, when Eve is presented before him, says, this finally is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. And then that's why they cling together. They are basar echad, they're one flesh. Now that's like deep language, primal language, somewhat like in that context, maybe even like there's a poetic romantic tone, but it's like it's deeper than just a romance. It's like, you're part of me. You're in me. We come from the same, and again, that's nice. They're you could see they come from the same people. I know. Okay. Soon want to just ask with you as we begin to sort of see the cues, the reference points here. I soon want to just turn to you and ask, like, so is Lavan, is there anything to suspect here? Is there something wrong? Because you can see the tradition has said there's something wrong. Is there anything wrong here? But just one more line before I turn it out to you. Because, I mean, it would be hard. What Lavan just said is so nice, and hug and kiss. It would be hard to accuse Lavan of anything. But it's the next line where things get not weird, but like, oh, the tone shifted a little bit. So let's take a look here. So he embraced him, he kissed him, he hugged him. You're truly my bone and flesh, Adam and Eve language. And he stayed with him for a month. And then Lavan said to Jacob, Achiata. It's true, you're my brother. I just said you're a bone of my bone and my flesh. Achiata. It's true, you're my brother. V'yavdatani chinam, but should you really be working for me for nothing? Higidali, ma miskoratecha. So tell me, what is your salary going to be? What is your payment going to be? How can I pay you? Okay. Well, I don't know if there's anything wrong there. Okay, like Jacob was with him for a month there, and then all of a sudden I don't know, it seems like he's been doing work the whole time. Like he started putting him to work. And then he says, I know I just said that we're the same person, we're blood and but like I should pay you if you're going to work here. Okay, also so far so good, right? Or are you seeing something suspicious here? Is anyone feeling like, oh yeah, I agree with the rabbi? Is there something kind of greedy or suspect about Lavan so far? Anybody got a hit? Marianka.
I just see it as the same materialistic attitude as when he saw that his sister got all that jewelry from a guest, and he was immediately so welcoming to him. And here he values Jacob as a potential worker. So he sees a very materialistic attitude to everything. That's how I see it.
Okay, great. So Marianka says, it does always seem to hover around transaction and wealth for Lavan, doesn't it? Like, it all seems nice. It's above the board so far, but it always seems to come back to, oh, I love you so much. Do I see your camels back there? You got a lot of camels. That's nice. You know, I mean, and by the way, where Marianka is exactly where Rashi is again, right? You're not going to be surprised that just like Rashi said up here, oh, he ran to Eliezer, to Abraham's servant, because he saw the rings. So let's just take a look at what Rashi says here. Lavan ran to greet him. So you can just click into Sefaria here and look. And he ran thinking that he was laden with money, for the servant of Eliezer had come there with 10 camels fully laden. So Rashi links it exactly. Rashi's like, oh, I'm sure he's seeing the same kind of thing. He's like, oh, when people come, they bring money, and I want money, right? Okay, all right. So that's a good.
I think also Jacob's labor is important to him. In those societies, to have a young, strong man working your flocks, it's a added value.
Yeah, that's right. And thus he is used. I mean, he puts him. It's kind of funny. You're my flesh, and you're my bones, and you're my love. And then and he was there with, and then it says, and he stayed with him for a month. That's so nice. His flesh probably stayed in the master bedroom. He's so welcome. But then the next thing is you've been working for me now for a month. It's like, wait, work? Oh, he put him right to work. Okay, now it's not that weird. I mean, surely Jacob wouldn't have just sat around. On the other hand, yeah, there's something very transactional about this so far. All right, let's take a few more hits on this. I'll turn to Noah, and then Matt, and then Regina.
Lavan's always been a semi-problematic character for me, exhibiting all these actions of love, but really only seeing what he can get out of any relationship. Now, we're reading ulterior motives because maybe that's the context we're living in now, because we can't see him without thinking, what can he get out of it? Perhaps he just was doing it so that he could gain more money, more stuff to support whatever family and household he had, and then help support Isaac and Rebecca, but maybe not. So there's always that materialistic claim, and it's hard to view him in a positive light because of all of that backstory.
Yeah, and part of what I'm hearing Noah describe is the way that there are kind of two levels to this Jacob and Lavan relationship kind of going on all through the Parsha at once. And one is just sort of, it's like, when you have a really tense relationship with someone at work, say, and, you have to conduct yourself according to the protocols of work, or it could be in your family as well. But there's this unspoken tension. And it does seem to be, as we move through, a lot of what Lavan and Jacob are doing, perfectly reasonable. Jacob is making his way in the world. He's marrying into a family that was the point of sending him out there, is to find a wife. And he's earning his living and eventually gets sent off. He does grow wealthy. I mean, there's nothing really wrong. And yet there's a tension underneath. And part of the tension is because along the way, certain weird things are starting to happen, as we'll soon see. Matt.
Okay. So first off, Jacob's he's a trickster character, a classic. He puts on a separate skin. He tricks people. Lavan is a shadow of Jacob, because Lavan's trick that he plays on Jacob is no worse than the trick Jacob plays on her. It's the same kind of thing. Jacob and that the trickster gets tricked is itself. Everything being that.
Are other people having trouble hearing Matt? Matt, we're having trouble hearing you now, but got the gist of what I think we totally got what you were saying. This idea Matt is putting so well that Lavan is essentially a foil for Jacob. It's a kind of a Jacob and shadow Jacob, who will be shadow boxing, right? Like Jacob is confronting a version of himself, Matt wants to say, and Matt's right. It's just clear. I sort of alluded to this at the outset. It's clear that Jacob, coming from trickery, is now running into the master trickster. So there's something like Jacob is, the Torah wants Jacob to be getting a dose of what he gave, right? That's part of what's going on here, as we'll soon see. Regina.
Well, I see this as it's the beginning of a contract. So if you start paying somebody, then you can start outlining what you want from them exactly. And I mean, that's, I'm just looking at it from that point of view. And then the other part is just, it's tagging on to what other people said, but working with relatives is not always so great. So maybe it is good to have a contract, working with relatives.
Okay. All right, great.
It's just a thought that popped in my head,
Right. And look, here's what's kind of worth mentioning on that note, which is that it does not seem to me that the Torah has outright disdain for guile. That is, this idea that one should turn the other cheek and always shoot straight and just speak the truth at all times, this idea that there's no room for crafty thinking. Lying and stealing are illegal in our tradition, right? But the idea that you might be smart about it. And towards the end of the Parsha, Jacob becomes wealthy because he knows, he's learned how to mate the animals together, and he makes a deal for one kind of animal, but then creates a bunch of others. Now, according to the rules of the marketplace, if you're a good capitalist, he played by the rules. And the same anxiety some of us have about capitalism is the anxiety we could have about that ethic, but it's an ethic that I think it isn't just dismissed outright. So there's a lot of language of contract, the rules, and we just heard the rules, the language. One of the words here that we're going to pay a lot of attention to is maskoret. Where was it? Tell me what your wages should be. Maskoret. Your payment. They use this word in modern Hebrew. Your payment, your salary. Now, okay, so we picked up on some of the kind of the echoes, the nuances that this opening scene has for us. But now we can start to get into the strangeness of the actual interchange, because if Regina's right that yes, this is just like formal payment, and maybe you need to make a good contract when you get into a deal with your family members. They don't trust each other yet. But Jacob says this. Now, Lavan had 2 daughters. The name of the older one was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah had soft eyes. And sometimes they say weak eyes. It's not clear what soft eyes mean, but it's soft. Ve'enei Leah rakot. They were soft. Rachel, I don't know, that could be a compliment or it could be an insult. Rachel aita yafat toar v'yafat mareh. But Rachel seems to be the real beauty in the family. She was yafat toar and yafat mareh. Jacob loved Rachel. That's strong language. V'yahav Yaakov et Rachel, loved Rachel. So he answered Vayomer. Now he's been there for 1 month. Vayomer evadcha sheva shanim barachel bitcha ktana. I will work for you for 7 years for your daughter Rachel. Now, I just want to ask: is that the right answer to what should your salary be? I don't know. I mean, it is an ancient world. I don't want to I'm not just going to dismiss it. Maybe that's the way these things played out. But it's like, let's get I love you. Now let's get very formal and transactional. And then the payment for the transaction will be the woman I love. Like a little odd. And Lavan's response is odd as well. Instead of, oh my gosh, of course, family, yay, simcha. He says, well, tov titiota lach mititiota leish acher. Okay, it's better that I give her to you than I should give her to some other man, some outsider. Shvai madi. Very terse. You know what? Like, you might as well take her. Yeah, that works. Better you than some other dude. I mean, yeah, I guess we'll deal. And some of this is just blatant patriarchy, right? Like, it's less weird in its time because it's men just deciding over the fate of women who don't have the same kind of social agency. But there's also, even in that context, it's blurry. Jacob loved her, but he wanted her as his salary. And Lavan loves Jacob as family, but is willing to take the deal where Jacob works for 7 years for a daughter that, yeah, you can have, right? So like, now things are starting to get weird. And I invite you also to ask like what Jacob's agenda is here. Like, what's Jacob thinking? And in some ways I'm asking the same question. This interaction, is this loving? Is this devious? Is this careful, cautious? What's the dynamic here? All right, let me turn to Joni.
Thank you. It's a little noisy where I am, so please forgive me. Has Shemitah come have we heard about Shemitah yet? Or that's later?
Not as an institution, no. Why? What are you seeing here?
Okay, so, well, what I'm seeing is I have come from a reverse birth order. I am doing something that's not in accord. Leah is the firstborn. This is the second. And I'm going to work really hard. I'm going to work much harder than I need to because I've done something really dysfunctional in my family. I don't want to talk about it, but I know pain that I may be causing by marrying out of the order that one should marry. The eldest cannot humiliate her.
That's really interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Where's Jacob coming from? Coming from a brother trying to kill him, a family that he just sort of unraveled. And Joni lays emphasis, he just upended the birth order. Just upended the birth order. Now that's interesting then, because just like there are 2 sons, there are 2 daughters on the other side. And Jacob likes the younger one, right? Because he is the younger one, and he likes the younger one going first, and he likes the selection of the younger one. Jacob's selecting the younger over the older. And I don't know, is that okay? Is that normal? Well, we soon see that it's possible that it wasn't so obvious, because there may be a presumption that a family marries its daughters off in the order of their age. Okay, and here we come to, and let's see it, just turning the halfway mark here in our class. So let's just make sure we get some of the material out here. Here is where so now they're transacting, and they're transacting over women that they both love and are treating as chattel. Like both those things are appearing in the conversation, and then this remarkable thing happens. So Jacob served 7 whole years for Rachel, but they seem to him, here's more romantic language, Vayu beinei k'yamim achadim ba'avato ota. But it seemed like nothing to him because he loved her. He just loved her. It's like very romantic. I've used these verses at weddings. Like, look at Jacob's love for Rachel. And then Jacob said to Lavan, give me my wife, or bring me my wife, hava et ishti, ki mal'u yamai, because I fulfilled my term, transactional language, va'avo aleha, and I will come to her, I will cohabit with her. Okay. And then Lavan gathered all the people of the place and made a feast, a mishteh. That's really kind of, I always say, a feast, it's not just a feast, it's like a drinking feast. Okay? And when evening came, Vayiba Erev, and now things kind of go off the rails. Vayikach et Leah bito. He took Leah, his daughter, Vayaveo to elav. He brought her to Jacob, Vayavo eleh, and Jacob cohabited with her. Now, whoa, what just happened? Right? Like, what's Lavan doing? How did Jacob end up doing it? Is there confusion? What's going on? But somehow he switched the daughters last minute. We do a bedekin now at a wedding and kind of an unveiling precisely because of this story, because of some idea that you could end up, like Middle Eastern woman often heavily veiled, and you could end up marrying the wrong woman. But this time it's on purpose. Lavan does it to Jacob. And Lavan had given his maidservant Zilpah to his daughter Leah as her maid, thus formalizing she's married now. She has a maidservant. And this is a great line. Vayhi baboker, v'hinehi Leah. He woke up in the morning and whoa, that's Leah. Like there's something almost comic about this moment, except that it's also tragic. Leah's just, whoa, that's Leah. So he said to Lavan, Mazot asitali, what have you done to me? Halo barachel avadati imach. I worked for Rachel. And then this last phrase here has got to echo with us. Valama rimitani. Why have you deceived me? Lama rimitani. When's the last time we heard that language of deception? Esau says Isaac says that his son, that Jacob came upon him b'mirma, with deception. All right, so that's like exactly where Matt was going. There's an echo just in full display. Just like you, just like you're gonna get, just like you're gonna. Okay, now we have to stop and just really process because something crazy just happened. All right, now Lavan came in and switched it up after 7 years, and I mean everybody in this scene is suffering, except I guess for Lavan. Lavan's kind of the mastermind, but Jacob wakes up with a woman he didn't expect to. Poor Leah, and there are all these midrashim of Leah just humiliated in this process. Oh, cool, yeah, now I'm married, great, that all worked out. Like, ugh, gross. Rachel, like, was gonna get married, right? Like, just like, yuck, what's going on here? And now, surely, Lavan is just a villain, right? I mean, have we now arrived to Lavan is a villain? And can we just say it that simply? I mean, it's to a certain extent, yes, right? Okay, I think I saw Elizabeth with a hand up earlier. Is it Elizabeth? Are you, yeah.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say that maybe Jacob said 7 years with the hope that Leah was going to get married in those 7 years and she was going to get out of the way. That's why he kind of extended the time that really needed to happen. But what I think is interesting is that we see Jacob as, the wise father, and we see Lavan as this terrible trickster, but it really is a story. I mean, you could make a very good movie. Who done it? Who done it to who? Because in the end, actually, Jacob is very clever, very clever. I mean, he knows genetics or epigenetics or something and figures out how to really give it as good as he got it. And he did get Rachel in the end. So it's just a fascinating story of why we admire one and not the other, when really both of them are just not the cleanest guys.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be said, just that we have to just take Elizabeth is kind of is pausing us and just really reminding us of something central here, saying, just remember, Jacob is not he's a complicated guy. This is like, there's nothing about Jacob that is like, and yet Jacob is our father, Jacob. Like it began, that's the dilemma that we're presented with really really in last week's, this week's, and next week's Parsha is that it's been couple of generations now, and we admired Abraham and we feared for Isaac. And then Jacob comes along, and just from the start, we're like, whoa, come on, man, you can behave better than that. And again, and again, and again, and scheming, and again. And so Jacob often feels like, I hear people say, oh, I don't like Jacob. Yeah, Jacob's a bad guy. But Jacob is the one. I mean, Abraham's the one because Abraham started, but Jacob is the one, like, he's the one that gets the name Israel. That's the name we take on. He is us. All of Jacob's children stay in. There's lots of things that Jacob does, I don't want to say well, but with such great significance that we are the children of Israel. We're not the children of Isaac or even of Abraham. Right? So that's a really complicated thing to deal with here. And this Parsha is doing some of that work for us of really like, look at this guy, Lavan. He's bad, isn't he? But how different is he really? Didn't he just do the same kind of switch up that we saw Jacob doing in the last Parsha? Isn't Jacob getting what's coming to him? Isn't that exactly what's going on? And in fact, that echo of language. Oh, you deceived. Why did you deceive me? You deceived me just as I had deceived. It seems like the story is playing with that dynamic deliberately. All right, and we'll see more as we unravel. But let's collect a few more interpretations. Arlene.
Okay, great. I see it's totally amazing to me. I see like a million different things, but what Joni was saying about the Smita year, to me, it's like the 7 years, it's the idea of, I think later on about morality with all the laws about how to treat your slaves and because like, for example, I think he's just setting him, Lavan is setting up Jacob to be his slave and to be indentured to him. And because Jacob has the freedom to leave and he doesn't.
Yeah.
So
good.
he, it's just, it keeps on getting more and more, and then Lavan makes all these, assumptions and everything, and Jacob goes along with it. Jacob never speaks up against saying this doesn't make sense.
Okay, this is great. Arlene is picking up on a thread here that we really haven't taken up yet, but that's the thread that the Haggadah is picking up on, which is there's a way in which Lavan, as the oppressor, sets the stage for there's a reason the Haggadah picks this story in the beginning of this story, as if Jacob is sort of playing out something that eventually all of his descendants will have to deal with, which is that you're trying to survive and make your way in the world, but like if you're not careful, you become someone's servant. And if you're not careful about that, then someone's slave. Jacob is working hard, and he says, I worked night and day, and you cheated me again and again, working for 22 years. 22 years, two plus decades, right? And is he a slave? He's not a slave. He marries the women of the house. He's not a slave, but there's something here that Arlene is picking up on that is also where the Haggadah wants to go, which is that there's an attempt to exploit the labor and then maybe the humanity of Jacob here. And Lavan is both like Jacob, like watch that in yourself. That's what we've been looking at so far, but also greater than Jacob, more powerful than Jacob, the oppressing force on Jacob, right? And so when Jacob and his children go down into Israel, and there is a powerful, more manipulative, scheming figure on a national scale, we hear echoes. So that's good work. Let's hear from Ariella.
Also, what I see is Leah is kind of the one in the middle here. Like, am I not worth a husband? Like, why am I the one why am I the price for the trick as opposed to, somebody's cherished bride?
Yeah. Good. There's something about this story that, as I said, it just throws Leah under the bus. Like Leah's just an object to deceive, right? And Jacob doesn't love her, or at least not the same way. And that's going to be a problem in her marriage, right? Like, what bigger problem could you have? It's going to be a problem. And it's going to be a problem now, but now, and then, okay, when Jacob marries Rachel, it becomes then now she has problems with her sister, right? And what is it? You can only imagine her relationship with her father. Poor Leah here, the elder child who should have, dare I say, the firstborn, right? Who, like Esau, now she gets the thing instead of having it taken from her, but she's forced to get. It's like an inversion of, but a kind of echo of that diminishing of the firstborn, that humiliation of the firstborn. And here, folks, is the real. This line is the puncher. Okay, this is the punch line, because the next line really is like it's like the Torah's writing at its finest, but it's like the heart of the matter here, because the Torah isn't just setting up a vague parallel. Look at what Lavan says to Jacob in response. So what do you do? What'd you do? I was in your service for Rachel. Why did you see me? And Lavan said, V'yomer Lavan. And remember, Jacob told him all of the things that had happened. V'yomer Lavan, lo ya'asechen bimkomeno. We don't do this in our place. Lateta tzira lifnei bechira, to marry off the younger before the older. We don't do that in our place. That's not the way we do it. And then he says, wait until the bridal week of this one is over, and we'll give you that one too, gross, provided that you serve me another 7 years. Okay, so setting up 14 total years of labor, 2 sisters married to the same guy, Jacob now being forced to be with a woman he didn't want in order to be. You can marry her now. You can have her. Notice it's not 7 years later. You can have her a week later, but you have to now you contract to work for me for 7 years. But the what's the key word here? The Sefaria translated that the younger before the older. But the key word here, let's go back down. Key word here is atzira lifnei bechira, which does mean older, but it also means firstborn. Firstborn. That's the word. That's the word that we spent all of last week's Parsha dealing with. So the word really is firstborn. And so Lavan is saying, we don't do that in our place. I don't know what you do back in your place, but that's not the way we do it here. In your face, you know what I mean? Like in your face. It's like very, very pointed, very coded, but not deeply coded language there, right? So there's the Torah saying like, you see what you get now? Okay, it's like dazzling as literature, but it's very uncomfortable as a human story. And also as a Torah's moral message. That's the way that this universe works, is like, because you'll get tricked by manipulating someone else's family, and now you have to be married to a woman that you didn't want to be married to, and like, what's the takeaway here? My God, like this is just a like mess upon mess. Like there's a kind of measure for measure, but it's mess for mess. All right. So what do we do with this? I mean, is this just gross? Like what do we do? Alexandra, can you help us out?
I don't think what I'm going to say is going to be very popular, but I think that we're a little hard on Jacob. I think, and one example is that if he were really a very shrewd person, he wouldn't have trusted Lavan in the first place, because a very shrewd person knows to be not trusting of someone when their words don't line up with their actions. And Lavan, when he arrived, didn't offer him food, didn't wash his feet, didn't say, come in out of the sun and bring him in. He only said nice words, but he didn't do any of the acts of hospitality. And then once he's working for him right away, like Jacob would have understood he's dealing with someone who is very shrewd, and he has to be very untrusting if he himself were as shrewd as we're calling him. And so I think that there is a case that we are being a little hard on him, and I also have a sort of a more sympathetic read of him in the stew story and the birthright and the conversation with Esav. But people aren't, I think it's comforting as humans to be like, this is good, this is bad, this person is a villain, this person is a hero. But people are more shades of, and things are more nuanced. And I don't think he is the shrewd personality that we're making him out to be.
Okay, that's a real, I thank you for that opening to consider this story in a different way, to consider Jacob as a real victim here, and Lavan indeed as a kind of, like also a complicated figure. Maybe he's not entirely good or bad either, but there's a kind of, we can sympathize with Jacob here. And that's certainly the way that Jacob sees the story. I mean, Jacob is really outraged at the way he is treated. Then from then on, and this is a good opportunity to just point out, we're not going to read through this, but just look at the way that Jacob continues to refer back to his dissatisfaction with Lavan. And it always comes back to a key word, which is that word for salary, maskoret. Like later, then we get into the workings of Jacob's family life and Jacob's work, and Lavan sort of disappears. But while we get that window into Jacob's household, and then the sort of time comes to go, and we read that Jacob says that Lavan's not acting like he was in the past, and Lavan's sons who are saying bad things about him, and so he takes Rachel and Leah out to the field, and he says, I think we got to get out of here. And he says, as you know, I've served your father with all my might, but your father has cheated me, changing my wages, maskorati, there's that same word, again and again. But God would not let him do me harm. And then later, when they actually come into confrontation, once again, Jacob says to, here again, of the 20 years that I spent in your household, I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your flocks. And you changed my wages time and time again. So, like, Jacob is experiencing this as a totally, like, chaotic, oppressive. Like, you always have to watch your back. For 22 years, he had to watch his back because this guy is a maniac. This guy is like, he'll push his older daughter into your bridal room. I mean, what kind of sicko? What kind of sicko? And I must say on that note, I want to add one more kind of connection or echo to our conversation, as I call Lavan a sicko, because it really is kind of, I mean, the Torah will later say you're not supposed to be married to 2 siblings, right? Which is pretty reasonable. What kind of sicko does this? There's one other echo here that we haven't yet considered, which is where else in the story we heard about an older daughter and a younger daughter and a kind of tricking, nighttime, perhaps drunken seduction of a guy who didn't know, right? Where? See some of you nodding? The Lot story.
Lot story.
Lot story, right? Where his daughters in that case get him drunk and sleep with him. And it's the same language, the older daughter and the younger daughter, right? So there's like something about all of this that is perverse in the most basic sense. Like there's some bad family dynamic here. And meanwhile, they're papering it all over, Jacob and Lavan, with the language of transaction. What about my salary? Your salary. I paid you. You paid me. It's all this sort of capitalist, male transactional language. But underneath, like, people are being wounded and manipulated and humiliated and kept in and trapped. Okay, so that's the pot that is brewing before us. All right, let's see if we can hear a few more comments before we close. Leah.
Okay. I pored over this as a child, looking for the fairy tale ending that would make true love between Leah and Jacob. and I never did find it. So I think it's part of the story is essentially about marriage. And Rachel and Jacob have Jacob towards Rachel has a fairy tale romance kind of thing going. Rachel is very involved in having children, but that doesn't prevent Jacob from having what I will call a night world with Leah. Is it 8 sons? Is it 6 sons that they have together? Okay, 6. I sobbed over this for many years as a child. Really, it was just so shocking that is this marriage? And then the Torah tells us at the end who Jacob and Leah are buried together. Rachel is buried on the, not on the side of the road, but she's buried in, I forget, a different place. She's not allowed. Yeah. So yes, he is dissatisfied and he was coerced and Leah was, I assume, coerced, and yet they got something.
Yeah.
There's also
you're weeping for Rachel.
And for Leah, and because I am a big girl was a little girl that still wants to believe in fairy tales.
Yeah, yeah. Good. That's an important thing to say here too, is that a lot of what this Parsha will take account of is the terrible, like, marriage dynamics. I mean, first of all, a man married to 4 women. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, for all of the for the fact that the Bible doesn't outlaw polygamy, I mean, Jacob is actually exceptional. We don't actually see people with a kind of harem of wives, right? Abraham had his weird thing, right? There's a concubine. Like, it's not that everything's monogamous. But Isaac and Rebecca were. Last week we considered the story of Isaac and Rebecca, where I tried to suggest this real feeling, human feeling here. But I don't, I liked what Leah said, that Jacob does love Rachel in the way that wow, she's hot, like immediately kind of Hollywood love. But like their actual relationship is hard, and he is not kind to her, and he has the nightlife with Leah, and he has a nightlife with Rachel, and things get uglier and uglier and uglier in this family. I mean, it's just like that part of the whole family structure is terribly fraught with all of the dysfunction you would expect if you married 2 sisters, for God's sake, I mean, yeah. So that's and Jacob is complicit here. We're having a kind of like what's the Bechdel test, It's like we're talking about Jacob and Lavan, all these men just negotiating women. Rachel and Leah are just sort of like the real prisoners here, Okay. That takes us to time, so I think we better end here. But I want to just say that the Parsha itself ends in a very strange place, where Lavan kind of runs to catch up with Jacob as Jacob is fleeing. And then in their sort of farewell to one another, Jacob complains and says, you did all this stuff to me, you changed my wages. And then Lavan said, well, in like kind, the daughters are my daughters and the children are my children, and the flocks are my flocks. Everything you see is mine. But what can I do? They married you. So, and then they set up this pillar and they make a mound as a kind of a witness. And just look at the last language. This is the last we hear from Lavan. Here is, they set up a mound, a kind of like a monument to an agreement that they make. And this is the agreement that Lavan makes with his son-in-law, the guy married to his 2 daughters. Here is this mound, and here the pillar which I have set up between you and me. This mound shall be witness, and this pillar shall be witness, that I'm not to cross you past this mound, and that you are not to cross me past this mound and this pillar with hostile intent. May the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, who's his ancestor, Abraham's brother, and their ancestral deities judge between us. And Abraham swore by the fear of his father Isaac. It's another name for God, Pachad Yitzchak. In other words, there's a kind of, they agree to disagree. They agree to be suspicious of one another. They agree not to cross each other's territory. But Lavan's final message is, okay, Okay, I'll back down, but just remember, I'm watching you too, because you're just like me. So that's where we leave Jacob after this parsha. And if he is to become anything but just like Lavan, we're gonna have to wait till next week to find out. All right, see you then.